This month's podcasts are sponsored by Aubergine Legal. Do you sometimes worry that your business isn't meeting all its legal compliance requirements and wonder if you're ticking all the legal boxes? Are you losing sleep worrying about a piece of legislation that you may or may not be complying with? Perhaps you need some help with your client contracts or your data protection compliance, or maybe you're worried that your website doesn't have the right documents or legal notices in the right place. Perhaps you have a brand that you want to protect with a trademark. How about if you could outsource it all and eliminate all of your worries? If so, then get in touch with Aubergine Legal, a friendly commercial legal consultancy offering practical and clear commercial legal advice without the overwhelming legal jargon, taking the worry away and helping you to protect your business and minimise your risks. Aubergine offers a free 30-minute consultation if you have any questions or want to find out if they can help, and you can access this link and book your free 30-minute call via the link in the show notes.
Welcome to the Bring Your Product Ideas to Life podcast. Practical advice and inspiration to help you create and sell your own physical products. Here's your host, Vicky Weinberg.
Hi, so today I'm talking to Charlotte Phillips from Rugsy Lugsy. So at Rugsy Lugsy, Charlotte and her husband handcraft home and giftware from reclaimed wood. I really enjoyed this conversation with Charlotte. You're going to hear from the chat that she's got so much energy and positivity. She's so passionate about what she does. I learned so much about reclaimed wood, wood in general actually. I'm always now going to be on the lookout for wood that Charlotte can make things out of. We spoke about selling face to face versus selling online, and about how Charlotte's business doesn't quite look as she thought it would at the outset and why that's not a bad thing. So hopefully that's piqued your interest a bit. And now I would absolutely love to introduce you to Charlotte. And as always, I really hope you enjoy this episode. So hi, Charlotte. Thanks for being here.
Hello.
So can we start with you giving an introduction to yourself, your products and what you sell?
So my name is Charlotte and my husband and I have a small business called Rugsy Lugsy, and we make and sell home and giftware from reclaimed wood.
Amazing, thank you. Let's start with how and why you got started with woodworking. And I apologise in advance if woodworking isn't the right way of wording it. I don't know what it
is the perfect terminology, actually. So
yeah.
I think I personally have actually had two distinct careers before I came to this. So when I first left school, I trained to be a florist. I used to do floristry and event dressing. And then for the last 20 years, I was actually an early years teacher. Got sucked in when my son was in nursery. You start out washing up the paint pots and end up running a department. And then in January 2020, I knew I'd had enough. I was done. I needed to just get out. Too much paperwork, too much politics, and I was looking for something different. The November before, I had created the Santa's Grotto for the school Christmas fair, and I decided to do a Scandinavian theme. So my husband and I made loads and loads of little wooden things. We had hearts. I made little sledges out of lolly sticks. We got a chainsaw, cut down a couple of silver birch trees, made them into reindeer, and it was beautiful. But kind of what got me thinking was when one of the parents said, "What are you going to do with all this stuff? Are you going to sell it?" And a little light bulb went on above my head, and that was the very start of Rugsy Lugsy. So although Neil and I had always been very comfortable around using wood, it's kind of our go-to material. So when we've sort of been given a couple of church pews, we turn them into our bed. Our kitchen we've hand built out of wood. So we had this tremendous collection of odds and sods of wood. So for us, it was such a natural place to go when I wanted to set up a business that it didn't even require a thought process. It was just like, well, that's what we're going to do.
Amazing. So did you literally start by selling off the things that you made for the nativity?
Well, those things, actually, the money went to the school because it was, you know, a
Yeah, of
PTA
course.
type event. And then I think we started just messing around. So I think by the February half term, my notice had gone in. Um, COVID was just starting to become a thing. It wasn't just some obscure illness in China anymore. It was starting to be more prevalent in Europe. So we knew things were going to change, and they were going to change quite quickly. So we started developing a bit of a product base, a lot of hearts. So I love heart shapes. So that was one of the first things we made. We had some Victorian floorboards from a house where Neil had replaced all the boards for them, and we cut hearts and sanded them down and started messing around with paint and ribbon and buttons and things like that. And then I think the second thing we made was the key houses, and they are huge now. They are possibly one of our biggest products. But we initially just made a key house to give as a housewarming present to a friend. And then you're sort of looking at it and going, well, yeah, I could sell that. I can make that and I can sell that. So yeah, that was kind of how that went. By the April, I was furloughed, which gave us time. And so yeah, by September, I think we were selling.
That's amazing. And that's only 18 months ago, isn't it, really? So you've
Yep.
achieved loads in that time. So I'm thinking where to go next. I'll tell you what might be good is if you can just talk us through some of your products actually, because I'm just thinking, Charlotte, obviously I've had a really good look around your website and I'm really familiar with what you sell. But given obviously that this is audio and people may not have come across you or your website, can you just talk us through just a few of your products just so people can get a really good visual?
Well, I think the first thing to explain is that all the wood that we use to make our products is reclaimed.
Oh
So
yes, I do
it's
want to talk about that later. Yeah.
so all our products have to have a signature distress look because the wood has been used for something else before. So quite often it has nail holes and things like that in it. So I've mentioned the hearts and the key houses. Another major thing that we make is wooden bunting. So that's just, if you run through the pages on our website, bunting is one of the big ones. The reason why we started making that was to get away from plastic bunting, which is not really very environmentally responsible. We also are very seasonal. So we have bunting for Halloween, for example, on Easter. So at the moment, our website is absolutely chock full of little Easter gifts and Easter decorations. We also make some practical things as well. So we invented a box that sits in the middle of a table with jam jars in it. We call it centerpiece box. The idea being, as I mentioned, I used to be a florist. Lots of people are a bit nervous about how to put flowers in the middle of a table. It's basically just takes all the mystery out of it. Just cut all your flowers to the same length, put them in 4 jam jars, job done. But you can also take jars out. You can put fir cones in at Christmas. You can put foil wrapped Easter eggs in for Easter. So lots of scope like that. Gosh, I'm trying to think what else we have on the website. We probably carry at any one time about £3,000 worth of product.
Wow. I was
It's
just about
huge.
to ask you that, whether you're making to order or whether you're making and then selling. How does that work actually? Because you have a massive product range. So is everything on your website physically made already, or are you making things as
Okay,
people ask for them?
yeah, so from a purely practical point of view, if you take a new product, so the idea will come to me, I'll design it, I'll make a prototype. If the prototype works, brilliant, it goes into production. If it doesn't, you tweak it, you go again. I usually start out by making 5 of everything, mainly because I've been caught out. So if you take the ho 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 bunting, so it's a line of Santa hats with a little pom-pom on the bottom of each one, and the middle 3 have wooden letters that say ho ho ho. I made one. I fronted up to a Christmas market with one set. I sold it by 10:30 in the morning. And you kind of then going, oh, well, that's annoying. If I'd made 2, it would have still been on my stall looking very decorative. So never again. Everything now gets made in lots of 5. The next thing we did was we linked the website to the Zettel, which is our payment device. So we track stock numbers. So the minute something goes below a certain number in stock, I get an alert. And that actually informs me of my making list. So on a Monday morning, I sit down, my to-do list looks a little different to other people's. Mine is a making list. And so I know exactly what I need to make before going to another market.
Oh, that's amazing. What a good system as well.
Yeah, it really is. We do bespoke pieces. So, for example, if you wanted some bunting with Vicky on it and your favourite flowers or something like that, we'll do that. So that has to factor into that to-do list as well. But yeah, it's as systems go, it's really good. It just makes sure that you don't have that situation where you're stood at a market with someone about to buy something and then it gets sold off your website. So
Yes.
yeah, which is a lot of makers' worst nightmare.
Yeah, because like I said, two completely different sales channels, aren't they? So you sort of need to have track of what actual stock you have
Yeah.
at any time. And are you making every day, Charlotte, or do you try and have like a day just for making? How does that work?
Okay, so it would be really, really easy for us to make every day because Neil and I have a studio each at home. So you do have to be disciplined. You have to take time out. Because otherwise you're going to get bored and you're going to get resentful, especially, you know, when times are tough. Actually, that's not completely fair because sometimes actually can be your salvation. So that second lockdown, for example, the really long one this time last year, we came out of that, I must have had 40 or 50 different kinds of bunting because it was a way of getting through. But you do need time to actually just go and live as well. So we took Tuesday off this week. It was Neil's birthday. We went down to Hastings. We walked on the beach. We went out for lunch. Went and looked at a couple of galleries. You do need that time. It's really, really important.
You do. I think you definitely need time for yourself. And then also, I guess there's also the time that's needed for the things that isn't the making. So the sending things, sending out orders and updating social media and accounts and all those other things.
Well, I've become the queen of putting systems in place. So number one, we of course have Jenny Cooper, time saver, Jenny does all of our social media. But you do have to supply her with content. Because as brilliant as she is, she can't actually magic pictures out of the air. And we use QuickBooks. So it's very, very beneficial, I think, to make sure that actually you're either making or you're spending time on you. If there's a system that you can use that actually stops you having to spend hours poring over books or finding hashtags or whatever else, I'm a great believer in using it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm with you in terms of freeing up time and also in sort of in systemizing things as well. So you would have known when you booked this podcast, for example, there's only 2 days a week that I actually record podcast interviews because as much as I absolutely love it, it's one of my favorite things. Practically, it just doesn't make sense to do it 5 days a week because then you're not doing the other things. And I find having set days of, okay, on Wednesdays I do this, on Tuesdays I do that, I think just really it helps me anyway. Obviously that isn't going to be for everyone, but yeah, I like systems and processes and anything that saves time and makes your life easier and frees up time, as you've said, is just ideal.
And from a selling point of view, it's astounding how many of these things actually link together as well. So if you can link, like I say, our website is powered by Shopify and Zettel actually will link at the touch of a button. So it just saves you so much time, so much angst.
Definitely. And I don't know whether you experienced the same, but I found initially when I was setting up my first Shopify website, for example, setting up all the automation. So I use PayPal. So setting up sort of the PayPal automations and all of this was a bit of a headache, I'm not going to lie. But as soon as it's done, you can just breathe a nice sigh of relief because it's all everything then works seamlessly. So I think it's worth, so for anyone who's thinking, oh gosh, that sounds like a nightmare, even if you have to get help, I think it's definitely worth getting any automations and systems in place, even if you need to find someone to help you do that, because it will just make your life so much easier going
Yeah,
forwards.
I mean, I must admit, this is where we did employ Jenny to set up the website and put all of those processes in place, because if you're a maker, you have to value your time. So I have a price per hour that, to me, my time is worth. If I am then spending countless hours trying to work something out that isn't my forte. I mean, I'm good at a lot of things. Technology is not one of them. So all that time that I've spent doing that, I'm not actually doing things that I am good at, that I do enjoy, and that do ultimately make me money. So I would strongly recommend go out there and find good people to do these things for you, because they're doing it all the time and much faster than you are at doing it. They'll tell you up front also how much they'll charge you, so you can make an informed decision. There's a small army of people out there to support small business, and I really recommend utilising them.
Absolutely, I really agree. And even if you feel you can't afford to pay someone like on an ongoing basis, even if it is just for a small job, like, you know, I can't work out how to connect Shopify to Zettle, there'll be someone that you can pay, and probably not much money either, because for them it's probably a 10-minute job. There'll be someone you can pay a small amount of money who will just do that for you.
Yeah,
And yeah, I agree that, as we were talking about earlier, we all have different expertise, and sometimes it can seem, I mean, I definitely, when I started my business, I definitely had the mindset at the beginning that I couldn't afford to pay for anything and I had to do it all myself. But then when you start looking at what your time's worth and you realize that you've just spent 3 hours on something when you could have been doing something that actually made you money, that's when you
yeah.
start to think, oh, I could have paid £15 and got that sorted, rather than spending 3 hours of my time, which is presumably worth more than that. So yeah, I think it's definitely a mindset thing.
Mm, very much so.
So, Charlotte, you were mentioning markets earlier, and I'd love to come back to that if it's okay. So, can you talk a little bit about the part that's of going to markets to sell your product has changed your business, whether that changed at all during the pandemic, and how you see things going forward?
Yeah, sure. So when I said, Rugsy Lugsy kind of arrived as a fully formed idea, and initially Neil and we're a bit older, our children have left home, we don't have that sort of level of dependency from anyone now. So we had this great idea, we were going to go around the country, maybe convert a horse box or something, typically sort of I was going to say like the George Clark Amazing Spaces kind of things that you see. And we were going to move from craft to craft fair, and then of course the pandemic hit. So suddenly that idea had to be replaced with something more local. And I phoned around, literally started emailing and phoning. We were really lucky. We met someone who recommended the Pantiles market. So we're based in Tunbridge Wells. The Pantiles is the historic part of Tunbridge Wells. They have this market going on. I spoke to the market manager, and he really liked the idea of what we were doing, and gave us a slot, actually with 48 hours notice.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's good. I did not have time to overthink it. So the markets became our lifeline, because it was our method of selling. So by that point, I had left my job. Remember, I'd handed in my notice. So it became my source of income. So the Pantiles has just been brilliant for us. We've then added others, as we do a couple of smaller farmers markets as well. What works really well for us is our product is quite unique. There are not a lot of people out there making things with wood and then painting it in the way that we do. We have two very different sides to our product line. So Neil makes beautiful key houses with hand painted backdrops. So he's got sort of real beautiful clouds and skies and cliffs and things like that. I'm more cute and whimsical. So trying to explain that is incredibly difficult. When someone's actually stood there in front of you and looking at it, it becomes much, much easier. From that, we also grew our social media presence. So having the QR code on the market stall and saying to people, you know, if you like what you're seeing in front of you, can you follow us on Instagram? And that's also meant that our Instagram following and our Facebook following have been more relevant. So it's all very well and good having like 1 billion followers, but if they're not actually going to shop from you, it's not really that helpful. So we know that all our followers are people that have seen our products and are following us because they really like what we do and that they will buy from us. That makes sense.
That does. And that is such a great idea. I never thought about that. I don't even know how to get a QR code, but that's amazing. And I think as well, there's a lot to be said, isn't there, for meeting your customers in person and being able to talk to them and then being able to tell you what they like or what they might like to see different. Do you know what I mean?
And for us also to explain the nature of the raw material as well. So, you know, we greet any new person in exactly the same way. Have you been to our stall before? Let me explain everything on it. We've made ourselves and it's all made from reclaimed wood. And you watch their level of interest go from sort of, oh yeah, okay, pretty things, to, oh, okay, now that's interesting. Yeah, okay, tell me more. And then we can expand on where you might have found the wood. So at the moment we've got these little chunky boats that we make. The masts on them are actually the little things that you twist to open Venetian blinds. So we were given an entire set of oak Venetian blinds. What do you do with the little things that are on the end? Well, you turn them into boat masts. So it's being able to explain that in person is really important.
Yeah, that is really nice. And I guess because all of your products will be made, all of your products are unique, aren't they? Because even if you're
Yeah.
selling lots of hearts, for example, some might become from an old, I don't know, a bench, and some might be from something else. In fact, yeah, talk me through a bit because I'm genuinely would love to know, Charlotte, where do you get reclaimed wood? So how do you find it and what kind of things do you use?
So first of all, we were really lucky. Neil is a chronic hoarder. So we actually had a lot of bits of wood that were too useful to throw out. So for example, you know, my mum was a church warden. Neil went and helped fix a roof on a church. They couldn't actually pay him, but they were getting rid of the church pews. And they decided to go for more comfortable seating. So we didn't even get the church pews. What we were given was the two things that stand at the very, very front that are basically just there for you to put your hymn book on and your glasses and whatever. So we were given those. Um, yeah, I kid you not. I had an entire set of Victorian floorboards where Neil had actually gone into someone's house and replaced them all. And they were all sitting on my allotment. Just too useful to throw away, could come in handy for something. And so when I started saying about wanting to make things, that was our first supply of material, raw material. Nowadays, I have a few key people look out for bits and pieces for me. So I have a couple of roofers and builders. Roofers are particularly useful. So like I get all the Victorian roofing slates that can't be reused, and we actually use those to roof the houses in our key houses. So if you've got one of our key houses, it's got a slate roof, that's actually a Victorian roofing slate. If you've
Oh,
got one of our lighthouses, that's the thing that actually makes the lighthouses an offcut of when you get a lead roof, you know, it's got rolls in it. That's an offcut of the things that they actually form the lead over to make those rolls. It hasn't actually ever been used in that case because no one wants something that's been contaminated with lead. I have a couple of landscape gardeners who look out for interesting, nice weathered old fences for me. Gosh, yeah, just, and people when they hear about what we're doing, come forward and go, well, I've got this, would you be interested in this? We use a lot of free cycle, and I skip dive with permission. So skip diving is amazing. One of my favourites was, if you're a local in Tunbridge Wells, you might know the Baptist Church at the very top of Upper Grosvenor Road. And during the last couple of years, they've taken down the tiny steeple that was on top of it. Apparently it had always leaked. We were walking past and stopped and chatted to the builders because they chucked it all in the skip, and it was beautiful. It had been handcrafted into this beautiful spire, but where it had leaked, the wood was damaged. So we said, "Oh, can we have that?" And this guy looked at us and so it went, "Yeah, but it's not good, you know." No, that's going to be absolutely perfect for us. And it made cliffs in our so we did a harbour scenes for our key houses. It made the most beautiful cliffs. Then we turned it round and found on the back someone had actually written March 1938 on it. You've got all that history. It's just amazing. Sorry, I'm off on a tangent now.
No, you're not. And it's like, I'm loving hearing all this. And you know, as we're talking, I'm thinking, oh gosh, I don't live that far from you. You know that I'm going to be contacting, you know, Charlotte, and saying, I've seen some wood, because
That
I'm
happens
just,
a lot.
I'm so inspired by what you're saying. I just think it's amazing that you're taking things that people don't want and need anymore and then making something beautiful out of it. That's like magic. It's
But you've got to
amazing.
think as well, I mean, that person that built that spire in March 1938, you've got to kind of think, well, what happened to that person? Because of course the following year we had a war, and that was the mark that they left, and no one knows what's happened to them because there was no name. So I kind of feel we're honouring them by
Yeah.
using it, making it into something that's, well, basically not in a skip. And also, I mean, on that point, Neil and I both grew up around heavily wooded and treed areas. I mean, Neil actually grew up in the middle of Bedgebury. So we both have a great love of trees. And for us, the amount of wood that actually ends up in landfill or gets burned is horrendous. I mean, I can give you a whole lot of statistics about the amount of wood in this country that is not recycled, because it's actually quite difficult to recycle wood. So that idea of giving it a second chance, making it into something new. And the great thing about wood is it has no environmental impact. So you're not making something out of plastic, for example, that could end up in the ocean. You could drop a Rugsy Lugsy product into the ocean, it won't do any damage to anything. I wouldn't recommend it, but you could. So for us, it's having that minimal impact on the environment around us, using a product that's already in existence rather than having to go and find a virgin material. So it's just something we are really, really passionate about.
I can tell. And I think it makes so much sense. So when you were talking about the trees, I was thinking that obviously we've had some pretty big storms here in Kent recently. And when I go on my dog walks, very often now I'm seeing trees that have toppled over, maybe trees that have been chopped up into pieces. You know, maybe the council have chopped them up to take them away. And I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, what's going to happen to those trees? Do they end up going in an incinerator? Or yeah, I'm
A couple of
asking myself
things
that now.
Yeah, a couple of things can happen. So quite often, if a tree falls and it's safe to do so, it will nowadays be left. And then an entire little colony of insects will move in and do what nature needs to do, which is the very best thing that can happen. If it's been cleared away, a lot of councils, to be fair to them, will find a way of reusing it. So it gets chipped and put onto flower beds in sort of council parks and things like that. So there is that virgin wood. It's the easiest to actually recycle, to do something with. What's more concerning is the humble pallet, for example. Quite often a pallet can be made out of a wood that's been sourced from where it was needed. So if we take Indian patio stone, for example, the wood that quite often is made into the crate or the pallet that will carry it over from India is rainforest. And at that point, that's devastating, especially at the rate that they're coming over. So we know a stonemason who was burning 50 crates a week. And that is horrendous for the environment on so many levels. So
That
many levels.
is.
So
And I suppose, sorry, I was saying, I suppose as well, what also gets hard is once wood has been used for something, whether it's as a bench or as a bed or as a pallet, presumably it then also gets harder to recycle. So I'm thinking that I'm sure most councils, if they end up with a wooden bed frame in the tip, for example, I don't think that would be recycled, would it? Or would it?
if it's still fairly virgin, so a pallet, for example, yeah, it's really easy to recycle it. Unfortunately, what it gets recycled into isn't too glorious. So it's the kind of board that you see when they board up a shop, for example,
Oh, okay. But at
or
least it does get
it does
reused.
get reused, or MDF. So everybody's a medium density fibre board that's used in a lot of furniture. That is quite often made out of a recycled wood product. So that's quite good. Sometimes it can be shredded down and used as packaging material. So all good. What's harder is, unfortunately, in this country, before 1990, when we painted things, we couldn't guarantee that paint didn't have lead in it. So that's a little bit sort of difficult to process. And a lot of wood that's used outside, so your bench, for example, or your decking has been tunnelized, which means it's been treated to stop it being eaten by insects. So it's poisonous. So again, that's, I mean, I will check it out, but they used to use arsenic to tunnelize wood.
Oh,
Yeah.
but I'm assuming you could do something with that wood, could you? Or could you not?
I try not to, because I don't want to breathe it in. So
That's a good point, because I suppose as soon as you start cutting, I didn't think about that. As soon as you start cutting it, and I suppose that's any same with anything with
with lead
potentially less
paint,
paint on.
yeah,
Didn't think about that. We're so lucky, aren't we, now that we don't have to think about. You know what I mean? But
yeah.
I think I'm of a generation where I don't think as much about things like lead paint, for example, because
We
it
don't
just
use it
hasn't been
anymore.
and
It's
I've
not a good idea.
never used it. You almost forget sometimes that these, you forget
Yeah.
sometimes how things are different although recently actually I found lots of I'm trying to think what's asbestos in the back of the garden, so that was fun.
Gosh, yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, that was the wonder product of the 1960s and 70s, I think. So, yeah, we're slowly eradicating that. But this is what I mean about trying to make a product that doesn't impact on the environment. So the paint that we use, for example, is it's called a low VOC, so it's volatile organic compound. So it gets into your waterway. It won't cause damage to aquatic life. So it's having that sense of responsibility, that it's not enough to just want to use a recycled product, but making sure that what you do to it has low impact as well. So it's it's a lot of research.
It is. And I guess this all ties back to what we were talking about before we started recording. Actually, we're having a little chat about, selling online versus selling face to face. And I can definitely see that for your business, selling face to face has, I mean, for lots of us, selling face to face has lots of benefits. But the fact you could actually say to somebody, this product is made from this product is made from that, and it's got that story behind it. I think that's a lot harder to convey online than it is when you're having a conversation with somebody.
Yeah, I mean, we've developed standardized lines, and we will explain to people that everything looks the same, but actually it's different.
Yeah.
Because it will depend on the use the wood has had before. So if you take our fish, for example, so we do sets of hanging fish that look great in the bathroom. When we started out making them, they were actually from Western red cedar from a 1920s greenhouse, I think it was. And now, now I'm actually using wine crates to make those. So they're going to be slightly different. They're going to weigh a different amount. That's a big one for us. So we do explain that to a certain extent on the website, that everything will look slightly different. But yes, you're right. It's far easier in person to explain exactly what you've made it from.
Yeah, it's just your product seems like they have such a story behind them that that's always easier, I think, isn't it, to convey in a conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you so much for everything you've shared, Charlotte. I have one final question, if that's okay, before we finish up. So I would love to know, what would your number one piece of advice be to other product creators and sellers? What's one thing you'd like people to know?
Be adaptable. As I've explained to you, we started out with one idea of how we were going to run the business. We had to change due to a pandemic. Now, I wouldn't ever wish a pandemic on anybody, and hopefully current situation, regardless, no one would have to deal with something as big and potentially damaging as that when they're setting up. But I think you don't know what the market is going to be like, be it online, be it selling through Amazon, be it selling at actually face to face. So it's a really good idea to just be adaptable, be ready to change, to tweak. Don't go into this with too set an idea of exactly how it's going to work, because I think you're going to set yourself up for failure if you do. So that would be my one piece of advice, would be adaptable.
I think that's brilliant advice. Thank you. Because you're right. So much changes that isn't with, well, things change that are within our control, but also a lot of changes that is without, what am I trying to say, out of our control as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, who predicted Putin?
Yeah, Putin, the pandemic. There's so many things, aren't there, that we just could never have predicted would happen. So I think that's excellent advice, because I think it can be really easy to sort of start out with this mission or idea and sort of cling to it, and no matter what happens, no, I'm doing this. But being able to adapt, you're right, is definitely a skill.
And you can keep your own ethics. So, for example, as you probably gathered, we're very much about the recycling, the making sure that we don't have an environmental impact that's too negative. Keep those, your core values. Just be willing to adapt a little bit on the way that you sell.
That's amazing. Thank you. And thank you so much for everything you've shared, Charlotte. So I will put in the links to your website and your social media in the show notes. Everyone can find it. And yeah, thank you again for your time.
Well, thank you. It's actually been really fun.
Good. I'm really pleased. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end of this episode. If you enjoyed it, please do leave me a review. That really helps other people to find this podcast. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes, and do tell your friends about it too if you think that they also might enjoy it. You can find me at vickyweinberg.com. There you'll find link to all of my social channels. You'll find lots more information, all of the past podcast episodes, and lots of free resources too. So again, that's vickyweinberg.com. Take care, have a good week, and see you next time. If you've been inspired to start a podcast in 2024, I really recommend my podcast host, Captivate. Captivate were my top pick when I started podcasting 4 years ago, because of how easy it was for a complete novice like me to get started. I've stuck with them for the last 4 years because Captivate is still really simple to use. They keep adding great new features, like the ability to share ads like these, and they've just been really reliable. So when you're ready to start your own podcast, you can use the link in the show notes and get a free 7-day trial with Captivate.